Hello there, and welcome to today's webcast, Smarter Budgeting, Essential Strategies and Tips. I'm Justin Marlowe, Senior Fellow with the Center for Digital Government and a professor at the University of Chicago, and I'm excited to serve as the host for today's webcast. Thanks for joining us. We're going to have a great session over the next 30 minutes. We want to first take care of a few housekeeping notes. You'll see some housekeeping notes on your screen. We will email a recording of this presentation to all registrants within 48 hours. Please use the recording for your reference, or feel free to pass along to colleagues using the Share widget in the console menu. I'm joined today by two excellent guests who are going to join me in an excellent conversation about challenges facing today's local government budget officers. Let me quickly introduce them. We have Cecilia McCorkle, who is a budgeting and implementation consultant with Euna Solutions. And we also have Justin Kopala-Singham, who is a senior account executive, also with Euna Solutions. Welcome to you both. Looking forward to an excellent conversation over the next 30 minutes. Our goal for today is to explore some of the challenges facing local government budgeting officials. Today's probably the single most challenging time we've seen for local governments, particularly as it relates to budgeting. Unprecedented amounts of federal government money flowing into local governments, enormous challenges around inflation and cost increases, rising interest rates making capital budgeting challenging, and all of this is happening against the backdrop of increasingly complex financial reporting requirements and just a general desire for a lot more transparency and accountability coming from citizens. We're here to talk about those challenges today and some of the technological solutions that might be available to help us deal with those challenges. Before we jump into that, we want to quickly take the pulse of our audience here. We have a poll question for you. And that poll question is designed to get at some of the challenges that you, the audience, are experiencing. So if you wouldn't mind, take a moment to respond to this poll. The question is, what are the most daunting challenges facing your budget team? What are the most daunting challenges facing your budget team? A is, well, workload increasing rapidly. B is workforce challenges. C is complex, inefficient processes. And D is the lack of collaboration and disjointed decision-making. So that's workload increasing rapidly, workload challenges, workforce challenges, local governments facing the same challenges as everyone else, and finding and retaining qualified staff, complex, inefficient processes, and a lack of collaboration or disjointed decision-making. Let's have a quick look to see what all of you had to say in response to that poll question. And the results are coming in as we speak. And interestingly enough, workload increasing rapidly seems to be the main one. More than exactly half of our audience saying that. Probably no surprise there. Complex, inefficient processes at 37.5%, and a lack of collaboration, disjointed decision-making at 12.5%. So workload challenges, inefficient processes, and challenges in collaborating. Well, that's interesting to see, and fortunately, we're going to be speaking to exactly those challenges here in our conversation with our panelists today. So welcome again to you both, Cecilia and Justin. The first question, just to kind of get things started, is just to give our audience some sense of where you both are coming from. I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and your past roles, particularly with cities and counties, and how that informs your perspective that you're bringing to our conversation here today. So if you wouldn't mind, Cecilia, that'd be great if you could start us off with that question.
Sure. So, as I've been introduced already, I'm a consultant here at Euna Solutions for budgeting and implementation. However, prior to Euna Solutions, I worked in local government. I worked in Pinellas County, Florida. I was a countywide budget division director there for several years. And my role really consisted of budget development lead, so guiding the organization through the budget development, all of our internal departments, our constitutional agencies or other external agencies, and developing the budget, going through the processes of public hearings, informing the public, et cetera, et cetera. Before I was with Pinellas County, I was with Osceola County. I also worked in the Office of Management Budget there as a CIP and budget advisor, and then later with the Public Works Department as a finance manager. So overall, about 15 and a half years in the public sector doing budgeting and finance.
Terrific. Great background and experience for today's conversation. Justin, welcome.
Absolutely. It's good to be here. My name's Justin, as Justin mentioned, and I'm a senior account executive with Euna Solutions. I've had the pleasure of over 3 years now working with local governments, specifically providing tools to help everyone improve budget collaboration and stakeholder engagement. So my perspective today will be bringing in some stories that I've seen in those last 3 years that may be able to help you, glean some information today.
Terrific. Well, speaking of, we've touched on a few of these enduring challenges and some more recent challenges already. Things like workforce processes, concerns around the overall workload and the overall scale and scope of work that local government budgeting folks are being asked to do these days. Justin, in your conversations with local government finance officers, what kinds of challenges are you hearing from them?
It's almost a question of what am I not hearing, right? I think that poll speaks very well. Everything's and your intro speaks very well to it. There's a lot of priorities that require a lot of effort right now. But I think what it's really boiling down to right now, and what's important for today's discussion, is the challenges of getting citizens to be engaged with the budget and also understand the budget. And the problem behind that is that with this, call it a broken link in this process, is that the people that I'm speaking to, primarily budget managers, their phone calls are ringing like crazy, their email inboxes are blowing up, the finance office inbox is blowing up with citizens asking questions that are already posted out there, posted out on the amended or adopted budgets. And your time's being eaten up, time that you already don't have. And also citizens grow pretty frustrated too, without this, I guess, easy access of understanding the budget.
Makes a lot of sense. What sorts of, at a high level, what sorts of solutions are you hearing about local budgeting folks employing in response to that challenge?
Yeah, so the first challenge there of getting citizens engaged in the budget, one really creative way that I've seen an organization, achieve this or better achieve this, is having what they call a citizen summit. So basically they have a one-day drop-in event for citizens. They go in, to the government office to get some in-depth information on the agency's strategic plan, but then it also gives the citizens a chance to provide their input in person on those plan goals. So of course, those ultimately impact budget decisions. And then the budget office has that for council as well, so that council can use that feedback from the Citizen Summit to update their long-term goals. Outside of a Citizen Summit too, I've seen tools that, it doesn't require that, quote unquote manpower. You can put up portals online as well, engagement tools, so that citizens can walk through, a simulation of sorts for the budget to provide the agency with some feedback as to what they would like to see, budget being allocated towards certain goals that they'd like to see funded.
Sounds like a interesting approach and a very sort of 21st century approach, right, to engaging citizens in those processes. Cecilia, let's talk about transparency a little bit. You had mentioned part of your background is in financial reporting, and there's obviously, just as we were saying, a real demand for information, a real demand to put information in the hands of citizens so that they can be engaged in the processes that we're talking about here. What sorts of challenges are you seeing to more transparency in local government finance, and what kinds of solutions, how are our local government finance officers responding to some of those challenges?
Well, one of the biggest things I think is sometimes your technology solutions. A lot of local governments don't have the newest and best technology. So some of the best transparency solutions, do require investing in some additional technology. And And so it has to be really something that they plan for, or they decide as a priority within their organization. Some of the tools Justin mentioned are good ways to reach the citizens without necessarily having to invest in technology, but some of them, if you want to really be able to communicate your budget really well, trying to reach your citizens through an easy access, you think budget books. So most organizations are required to publish a budget book of their adopted budget. And so most of the time it's a very, very long PDF document, let's say 900 pages sometimes, mostly numbers. There will be narrative, but really being able to communicate with the citizens and anticipating what they need to know. You just really can't answer every question that way, and you're really trying to give them insight into what their tax dollars are paying for, what the priorities with the organization are. And citizens don't have time to read 900 pages, nor do they want to. So it does make it really difficult to communicate what they really want to understand. So there are certain technologies, the transparency options, that allow citizens to engage with the budget, with the financial aspects, and also building in more information as far as, let's say, what your CIP projects, what's going on with those. That's usually a big thing that citizens care about. When is this road going to be built? When is it going to be complete? Those are big things that a lot of tax dollars go for. Sales tax dollars often are used for things like that, and understanding what the schedule is, what the progress is, and understanding that. And a lot of times there are good technology solutions that allow those transparency options. Even with the technology solutions, well, that does help, but there's a lot of times there's accessibility issues. So making sure that what you want to communicate with the citizens, you can actually put out on your website, and it can be accessible by all of your citizens, is another big challenge that I know organizations are having these days, because even putting a PDF on your website is not usually accessible to all of your citizens who want to engage in it. So I find that that's a big challenge. And also, like Justin said, educating the public. Most people are not financial professionals. A lot of people are, but really understanding what a book of numbers looks like, and really being able to make that presentation to them engaging and interactive, I think, are key things that allow them to really understand what's going on. And it takes some of the pressure off of your budget departments, your executive leaders, and your legislative leaders, when the citizens and their public and their constituents all have better information and understand it better, and it helps them make better informed decisions.
Definitely. We typically think of, Cecilia, the budget as sort of an annual document and something that we're doing year over year. But we have seen a lot of local governments have some success with longer term budget forecasting. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the pros and cons of long-term forecasting, and how are you seeing agencies deploy long-term forecasting?
Well, whether or not you're adopting officially a multi-year forecast or multi-year budget, excuse me, I am a big proponent of creating a multi-year forecast. And that was something we did in practice when I was with Pinellas. And the benefits for that, in my opinion, are, and actually in my experience, to be honest with you, are really that you have fewer surprises that way. So if you think pre-COVID, yes, nobody was going to actually predict COVID. At least I don't think so. But being able to look at, this is where we stand, and we had tools developed that we used to do we had a 6-year forecast that we would do every year. We would present that. Of course, it quickly changed that year, but the other key is to really to be flexible with it. Don't just create it one time and say, this is what 6 years from now is going to look like. And again, COVID was a good experience. Even right now with the inflation and all the things you mentioned at the beginning of the broadcast, Justin, all of those things are things that most people didn't predict. But if you're doing those forecasts and you're watching the economic environment, you are able to adjust a little bit more accordingly and not really caught off guard as if you're not looking, not being forward looking. So it's great when an organization can actually adopt a multi-year budget, but I even if you can't, I highly recommend those forecasts. Another thing is that it gives your leadership insight into what their decisions they're making today, how that really impacts them in 5 years. So, when I was with the county, one of the things, for instance, we had a fuel tax that was authorized for 10 years. So we're looking at our 6 years, and we're seeing that fuel tax is going to expire in 3 years if we don't make if our board doesn't make a decision on this, or perhaps it needs to go to referendum, and something like that takes even longer. It really takes a couple years to get those things really out to your, with the fuel tax we had in our local agreements with 24 cities. So that takes time to coordinate. But first we needed our board of county commissioners to actually say, we want to do this again. Let's get this going. And the best way to show them whether this was a good option, or do we just say we retire the tax, was looking at that forecast. Here's what it looks like if we renew it. Here's what it looks like if we don't. And they immediately said, we need to think about renewing this, and it set the ball in motion, and we ahead of the game. It did not sneak up on us at the last minute. And things like that should never sneak up on you. But, when we're talking about the staff turnover that folks are having right now, maybe new folks to your organization who don't realize the history of that. If you're consistently keeping those long-term forecasts, then you're able to foresee those, and somebody comes in and it's not a surprise to them either when they're new. Also, strategic goals. Your organization more than likely has strategic goals, and it helps you with a long-term forecast or a long-term budget be able to prioritize and then see, how can we financially afford to do these things? Can we? Let's maintain the right reserve levels, because a lot of organizations, if not all, have reserve levels that they maintain. So it allows you to see, again, if we're going to spend a lot of money this year or this upcoming year, are we still going to be in a healthy level in a few years from now? So to me, there's so many pros for that. Now, some of the cons, is if you're not communicating your forecast and updating it regularly with your leadership, sometimes they remember one thing you told them, and if you're not staying in constant communication and making this a tool that they're used to seeing, they may, well, you told me last year that it was going to look like this. What happened? And so you do have to continue to communicate. You do have to continue to revisit and adjust. Just like as all of these things we've talked about, some they do change. They change day to day sometimes. So regularly adjusting that throughout your budget process is something that you have to do. So that does require time and effort, and researching the economic environment beyond just your local economy. That does require time and effort. And so, with being understaffed, it does make it harder. But again, if you create a process and you're consistent with your approach, it makes it a little bit easier once you get going. And technology can absolutely help you out. But my best advice would be, if you're going to do that, don't just make one version. Make your worst case, your best case, and somewhere in the middle. And that's what especially when you're trying to do decision making, because you hear all the time, another recession may be coming, et cetera, et cetera. So you show that, you show what's happening for real, and then let your leadership kind of choose. Usually it's going to be in between.
Sure. That makes a lot of sense. Well, I guess as a follow-up on that too, bringing to life all those different potential paths that things could follow is really important, it sounds like, from what you're saying. And I would imagine too that a part of that is getting everybody on the same page about what we're assuming and what we're not assuming, right? And understanding how it is that we may land in all of those different states of the world. And it seems like some of the technological tools that we're talking about here would be really helpful in that respect too, just to get everyone on the same page, but understanding what we're assuming and what we're not assuming.
Yes, absolutely. And you can have it all in one place. You can store that information. But yes, it really is, depending on what you're trying to predict, it's going to have a different level of assumption. Some things may just be based on what you're used to seeing. Some things may be local indicators, such as your property taxes and what your taxable values are. Some things could be a CPI based type of thing. But yes, communicating that out and kind of keeping it in one place, and then being able to see historically, this is what we thought. And you really do need to revisit that and see how well you do, because you may need to adjust the approach you're using. And I think that's one thing that we learned over time in Pinellas was, you know, that approach we were using maybe wasn't the best one. Let's look at this. Are we getting pretty close with this? You know, aside from your things like COVID. I mean,
Sure.
I would have been amazed if we were close with that. But on a, you know, on a year-to-year basis, yes, revisiting that and having your assumptions, you know, transparent and making sure that you're revisiting them and assessing whether they're the right assumptions to be using.
Yeah, for sure. I can imagine it would be tough to explain having an assumption called global pandemic and see what happens.
People may have it now in the future, though.
True. Yeah, very true. Very true. So we were talking a second ago about transparency, and wondering too, Cecilia, if we could talk just for a second about, you know, the GFOA's distinguished awards are such an important part of the local government budgeting and finance landscape. The excellence in financial reporting and the excellence in budget preparation. And it sounds like from what we're talking about here, some of the tools that we're describing, and certainly based on some of your experience, it seems like there's ways to maybe streamline financial reporting and budget preparation in ways that would make applying for and ultimately earning some of these GFOA awards that much more tangible, right? That much more accessible. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I think so. GFOA is great as far as, aside from the submitting for award, they're great as far as providing you with a lot of good resources and best practices. So a good way to, you know, not spend your time doing all the research. You have a lot of experts in the field who are doing the research for you and provide, you know, insight into good ways to actually, you know, prepare your budget, you know, what's a better approach. And it changes over time, just depending on everything we talked about here. Things change, and approaching budget preparation differently. It's a hard thing to do for an organization, one, because it takes time to really sit down and focus differently. And it certainly takes a lot of communication and change management. The award itself is a good compilation of a document that is essentially what they do is they have these criteria that say a great budget document would have these things in it. And it really encourages, you know, use of charts and graphs. And it kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier with the transparency and as far as citizen engagement. It's very, very hard when you're looking at hundreds of pages of numbers to make heads or tails out of it. And sometimes when you have, you know, a pie chart, a graphic of some sort, something that breaks it down in a different way, it makes a little more sense. You don't have to go find the number. It's just right there. It's easier to use. So they're really a big proponent of that. It also provides consistency in how all the agencies are trying to report. So as a citizen, you know, it's not different if you move from one city to another and you have to open their book. It's relatively consistent, even though it still allows for flexibility and individuality for the organizations. But it definitely gives a lot more guidance and it allows people to have very transparent and informative documents when they prepare their budgets.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. So we're going to have another quick question or two in conversation with our panelists, and then we're going to turn it over to you, the audience. So if you have questions to share, feel free to enter them in the webinar, and we'll get to those that we have time to get to. So a question for both of you. We start with Cecilia, and also curious to hear what Justin has to say about this. We've talked a lot about technology so far here today. When we think about the future of budgeting and we think about future-proofing budgeting, what sort of role do you see technology playing in that future-proofing process?
Well, I will circle back to one of the concerns that we saw on the poll. People have a lot more work to do. We're trying to meet all of these demands of, you know, this, you know, all of this extra work, fewer people, fewer staff turnover. Having inefficient processes makes your job a lot harder. And not even just inefficient processes. I used to have to, you know, before we came to a good budget solution that we ended up with Quest Good Budget and Pinellas, but we would have, you know, some parts we were doing using SharePoint for, you know, input from departments. We had Excel sheets. We had a budget software. We had a separate application that we developed so that we could get a lower level of detail. And all of these things, the more manual they were, the more different platforms that you were using, the first of all, not efficient use of time, greater chances for error. So then you're having to really validate, make sure everything's absolutely right, or you're looking for errors. You may make mistakes. So just really the inefficient processes and the inefficient use of multiple platforms really could cause some problems, and makes it a lot harder. So having a good technology that ties these things together, it makes it easy to use and makes it collaborative, I think is key to future-proofing your budget. And I'll stop talking so Justin can say something now.
I appreciate it. You did, take the thunder a little bit. I think with that initial poll, if you were allowed to click multiple selections, I think we would have had 100% on the overwork or overload of work, whatever that first one was. And I think that's where technology is going to come into play in a big manner. From everything we've talked about, from the forecasting, scenario planning, to having citizens engaged with y'all somehow. I know I talked about the Citizen Summit. That involves a day of your time, and not just one person, multiple people. Whereas we have tools where citizens can access a simulation every single day. Or for example, the GFOA criteria that changes mostly on a yearly basis. It's best standards, but it's probably more than a lot of folks do currently. So it's putting more on your plate. So with the addition of technologies that help you all do your job faster, I wouldn't say better because you all are the professionals, but to help you make things a bit more efficient, it puts some time back in your pockets that will help you spend time on things that maybe don't matter more, but require a bit more of your attention that you just can't get to because you're spending long nights on, say, a GFOA compliant book, or preparing half an hour before a meeting where you got to get a bunch of scenarios ready on spreadsheets because you don't know what kind of questions you're going to get asked in a meeting. I think that's where technology is really going to help what we call future-proof budgeting. And by future-proof budgeting, we're really talking about the people who budget, and we're helping to future-proof y'all and give your time back with technology. So I think it's going to really solve that first poll question there of how do we help people feel like they're not have 1,000 pounds of pressure of workload on them.
For sure. Maybe one quick follow-up question on that in the minute or two that we have left here. Top of mind for so many local government budgeting and finance folks is the federal money and the challenges that are coming with that federal money. A big one, of course, being a lot of the external reporting, both to the federal government as well as to citizens and state legislators and anybody else who's interested in learning what's being done with those dollars. Do you see that as a different kind of challenge, or is it the same basic transparency challenges we have, just on a kind of broader scale because it's a lot more money and a lot more eyes peering in?
Are you talking to me or Justin, or does it matter?
Go for it.
I think you hit the nail on the head with the eyes peering in. There's a lot more. There's a lot more to understand about it because those federal dollars are, always a little bit different in how you're able to use them. But everybody knows that when you have them available, everyone knows. So it, kind of going back to some of the conversation about really transparency and even change management communication, really being able to nail that. To understand exactly how it can be used, to make sure we're, communicating that. And those tools are, everything that Justin just mentioned earlier are key for that. Really being able to stay on top of that because it is a lot of money and it needs absolutely a ton of oversight, to be honest with you.
Definitely. Okay. Well, before we wrap up, we do have one more poll question for you, the audience, to give a sense of how things have gone today and where things might go from here. So if you wouldn't mind answering this question for us. The question is, which topic would you like to learn more about? Transparency, citizen engagement, personnel budgeting, collaboration, or reporting and forecasting? So that's which topic would you, the audience, like to learn more about? Transparency, citizen engagement, personnel budgeting, collaboration, or reporting and forecasting. We've talked about each of these a little bit today. So kind of curious to hear what the audience thinks they'd like to learn more about going forward. Let's have a look at those results. And looks like reporting and forecasting is the winner at 40%. Maybe not surprising given how much we've talked about it today and a lot of the interesting opportunities for improvement and future proofing that we've talked about today. Transparency at 20%, citizen engagement at 10%, personnel budgeting at 20%, and 10% collaboration. So spread pretty evenly across all of those different potential choices, but quick preference for more on reporting and forecasting. Very interesting results, and certainly plenty of work to do here and a lot more, I think, for all of us to learn. Okay, well, with that, I want to be respectful of our time commitment here today, so we'll wrap it up. In closing, I just want to thank Cecilia and Justin for sharing their insights on today's webcast. And of course, we'd also like to thank Euna Solutions for making it possible to have this important webcast discussion today. Also, thanks to our audience for spending time with us. We look forward to seeing you again at another government technology event. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Justin.